I found out my brother had been forging our mother's signature the way you discover most betrayals quietly, in paperwork, weeks after the grief had already made you soft enough to ignore the warning signs. I was sitting at the kitchen table that had been in my mother's house for 30 years when my phone rang. My brother. I looked at his name on the screen for a few seconds longer than necessary, the way you do when you already know the tone of the conversation before it starts. My mother had been in the ground for 19 days. I had spoken to him exactly twice since the funeral, both times short, both times his voice carrying that particular lightness people use when they are building distance from something they plan to do later. I answered, "Hey," he said, like we talked every day, like he hadn't disappeared for the better part of 2 years while I managed her medications, drove her to the oncology appointments, slept on the couch downstairs when the nights got bad. Hey, like none of that had happened and we were just two siblings catching up on a Tuesday afternoon. I waited. "So," he said, "I've been thinking about Mom's accounts, the savings account." He paused just long enough to let the number form in my head before he said it. "There's around 40,000 in there, right?" I kept my voice level. "You'd need to talk to the estate attorney about distributions." He laughed, not because anything was funny, but the way people laugh when they think a boundary is a performance. "Elena," he said, using my name the way our mother never did when she was annoyed with me, flat, clipped, like a rubber stamp. "You're the executor. You just write the check. I'm not asking for all of it. I'm asking for my half." Mom would have wanted that. Mom would have wanted that. I had heard that sentence in some variation since the day she was diagnosed. He said it when he needed money for the car. He said it when he asked me to cover his half of the caretaking costs he never actually contributed. He said it at the funeral when he told the cousins she would have wanted everyone to celebrate her life at the restaurant 2 blocks over, the one where he'd already ordered bottles he expected me to expense against the estate. "Mom left a will," I said. "It's going through probate. You know that." There was a pause. Then his voice shifted. That slight adjustment people make when they move from casual to deliberate. "Yeah," he said, "about that. I actually found something. A document. I think Mom updated her wishes before she passed and it might not have been filed properly." My spine went very still. "What document?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. He said, "I just think we should handle this between us. Family. Before it becomes a whole thing with the courts." I told him I would look into it. I told him I needed to go. Then I sat at my mother's kitchen table for a long time, looking at the window above the sink that she had kept a small succulent on for 15 years. And I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with grief. The next morning, I called the estate attorney first thing. Her name was Patricia, early 60s, the kind of woman who had heard every version of every family story and never let any of it show on her face. I told her what my brother had said, the document, the updated wishes, the suggestion we handle it between us. Patricia did not pause. "Has he sent you anything in writing?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Don't respond to him until we talk," she said. "And pull your mother's savings account activity online today, right now, before we hang up." I had the account pulled up before the call ended. The account was in my mother's name with me listed as a joint holder for the last year of her life, added at her doctor's suggestion when she could no longer manage it herself. I scrolled through the transaction history the way you scroll when you're looking for something you're afraid to find. The account balance was correct. Nothing had been transferred. But at the bottom of the page, in the activity log section most people never look at, there was a line item from 4 days ago. Attempted online access. Failed authentication. Account flagged for review. I read it twice. The attempt had been made at 11:48 inches the morning on a day I had been at work. The device was listed as unrecognized. The IP location field, which the bank sometimes populated, showed a city 2 states away, the city where my brother lived. I screenshot everything, forwarded it to Patricia, and sat with the particular feeling of being right about something you desperately did not want to be right about. Patricia called back in 20 minutes. "Go to the bank in person today," she said. "Bring your mother's death certificate and your letters of appointment. Tell them you need to speak with the branch manager about a flagged access attempt on the account." The branch was 10 minutes from the house. It was a Thursday, and the parking lot was half empty. Inside, it smelled like recycled air, and that particular quiet that bank lobbies have, like everyone inside is doing something serious, but trying to look casual about it. A teller directed me to a manager's office in the back, a younger man named Derek who shook my hand with the practiced warmth of someone trained to make people feel like their problem was his priority. I explained why I was there. I slid the death certificate and my letters of appointment across his desk. He looked at them, nodded, and typed something into his system with the focused expression of a person who already knew part of what he was about to tell me. "There was an access attempt on this account 4 days ago," he said. "It was blocked by our fraud system because the device wasn't recognized and the login credentials were partially incorrect." "Partially incorrect," I repeated. He turned his monitor slightly toward me. The username was entered correctly. The password was wrong. 3 attempts. I kept my face steady. "Was there anything else?" Derek looked at his screen for a beat. "There was a phone call to our customer service line the following day," he said. Caller identified themselves as the account holder's authorized representative and requested the balance and a wire transfer form. The representative on the line asked for verification, and the caller was unable to provide the secondary passcode. "Who called?" I asked. He turned the monitor further. The call notes showed a name. The caller identified himself as the account holder's son and stated he was managing the estate. My jaw tightened. "Is there a recording?" Derek nodded. "For investigations, yes." He slid a form across the desk. "If you file a fraud report, we can preserve everything." I signed it. My hand didn't shake. Derek added one more thing before I stood. "The caller," he said, "also asked our representative whether the account would transfer automatically to next of kin without going through probate. He said the executor was uncooperative and withholding funds from the rightful heirs." Uncooperative. I recognized the shape of that word. It was the same architecture as unstable and controlling and manipulative words assembled to make the person asking the questions sound unreasonable before anyone even checked whether the questions were valid. I thanked Derek and walked out with my copies. In the car, I called Patricia and told her what the bank had said. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You mentioned he referenced a document, a potential update to your mother's will? Before we do anything else, I need you to go to the county clerk's office and pull the probate file today." The county building was downtown, 20 minutes away. The lobby had the particular bureaucratic smell of carpet cleaner and institutional coffee. A security guard waved me through without interest. The probate clerk window was staffed by a woman in her 50s with a lanyard and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and when I gave her my mother's name and the case number, she typed for a moment and then her expression did the subtle thing that experienced clerks' expressions do when they find something irregular. "Is there an issue?" I asked. She looked at me carefully. "You're the executor on file?" "Yes," I said. She turned her monitor slightly. "There's a document submitted to this file 2 weeks ago," she said. "The week after the initial will was entered into probate." I felt the cold move through me again. "What kind of document?" She tapped the screen with her pen. "A handwritten codicil," she said, "submitted as an amendment to the original will. It states that the deceased wished to divide the estate equally among both adult children, superseding the original distribution." I kept my voice even. "Who submitted it?" The clerk's lips pressed together. "It was submitted through our document drop box. The submission form is signed by an interested party." She turned the monitor toward me. The name at the bottom of the submission form was my brother's. "Was it authenticated?" I asked. The clerk exhaled slowly. "That is the issue," she said. "Codicils in this state require notarization or 2 witnesses with signed affidavits. This document was submitted with a notary stamp, but the stamp number flagged in our verification system as inconsistent." "Inconsistent how?" I asked. She clicked into another screen. "The stamp number belongs to a registered notary in this county," she said. "But when our office ran routine verification, the notary's log doesn't show any appointment matching your mother's name or the date on this document." My stomach dropped in the way it does when a fear becomes a fact. My mother had been in hospice care the week that date showed on that document. She had been on continuous pain management. She had not left the house. She had not signed anything except a card for my daughter's birthday that I had helped her hold the pen for. "Is the codicil being treated as valid?" I asked. The clerk's voice stayed neutral but careful. "It's been flagged for review," she said, "which is why no distributions have changed. But if it were authenticated, it could affect the probate order." "I need copies of everything," I said. "The codicil, the submission form, the notary verification flag. You're entitled to them as executor," she said. While she printed them, I stood at the window and thought about my brother's voice on the phone. The lightness in it, the confidence. He had submitted a forged document to the probate court while I was planning our mother's funeral reception, while I was calling her friends, ordering flowers, making sure the cousins had the address. While I was doing every single thing I had always done, he had been somewhere building a paper trail designed to take the house my mother meant for me to have. The clerk returned with a stapled packet and slid it under the glass. The first page was a photocopy of the codicil. The handwriting was close to my mother's, but not quite right. The letters leaned slightly differently. The signature at the bottom had the right general shape, but the pressure was wrong. I had watched my mother sign her name thousands of times. I knew the small downward curl she made at the end of her last name, a habit from grade school she had never lost. This signature ended flat. I stared at it until my throat tightened. The second page was the notary stamp detail. The clerk had circled the stamp number in red pen with a small note. Sequence inconsistent, verify with state registry. The third page was the submission form. My brother's printed name and signature at the bottom, dated the same week I was picking out the flowers for her casket. I drove straight to Patricia's office. She read through the packet without speaking. When she finished, she set it on her desk and looked at me with the steady expression of someone who has seen this before and still finds it worth being angry about. "This is forgery," she said simply. "The codicil signature and the notary stamp are both suspect." She picked up the notary detail page. "Do you know if your mother had any contact with a notary in the weeks before she passed?" "She was in hospice," I said. "She didn't leave the house after the second week of October." Patricia wrote that down. Then she looked up at me. "Did your brother have access to any of your mother's documents? ID? Financial records? Anything with her signature?" I thought about the month after the diagnosis, when my brother had flown in for what he called a supportive visit and what I later understood was an audit of what she owned. He had gone through the filing cabinet in her office. He had offered to help her update her banking information. I had been grateful at the time. I had called it him finally showing up. "He had access to her documents," I said, 2 years ago, for about 2 weeks. Patricia's pen moved. "He had what he needed to copy her signature," she said. "And the notary stamp, we need to contact that notary directly. If their stamp was used without their knowledge, that's identity theft layered on top of forgery." She called the notary office while I sat across from her. The notary, a man named Robert who ran a small mobile service out of his home office, answered on the second ring. Patricia explained the situation. There was a long pause on his end. Then his voice came through the speaker, tight and careful. "I absolutely did not notarize any document for that woman," he said. "I don't have a record of that name. If someone used my stamp number on a document I didn't execute, I need to report that to the state registry immediately." Patricia thanked him and ended the call. She looked at me. "Your mother's signature is forged. The notary stamp was used without authorization. This is a criminal matter, Elena, not just a probate dispute." She drafted 3 filings that afternoon: an emergency motion to flag the codicil as potentially fraudulent and suspend any effect it might have on the probate order, a notice to the court preserving all submission metadata from the document drop, and a formal request for the county clerk to place an access hold on the estate file requiring my in-person verification for any further changes. While she typed, my phone rang. My brother. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it on speaker so Patricia could hear. His voice was easy, almost cheerful. "Hey, just checking in about the document I mentioned. I think it's pretty straightforward," he said. "Mom always said she wanted things to be equal between us. I know you've been stressed, but this doesn't have to be a big deal. Just reach out to the attorney and let's get the distribution adjusted." He paused. "Or we can keep it simple and just handle it directly. You know, without making it complicated for everyone. Handle it directly." I knew what that meant. It meant he wanted me to transfer money without the courts knowing. It meant he wanted the forgery to stay a private family disagreement that resolved in his favor before anyone looked too closely at his document. Patricia looked at me after the voicemail ended. "Save that," she said. I already had. The next morning I drove to the notary registry office, 2 towns over, a quiet state office that kept records of every commissioned notary in the county. The woman at the desk pulled up Robert's license number and cross-referenced the stamp sequence on the codicil in under 4 minutes. Her face didn't change, but her voice went careful and deliberate, the way people sound when they are documenting something for a record. "This stamp number is registered to the notary you identified," she said. "But the sequence suffix is incorrect. Someone altered the stamp number, slightly changed the last 2 digits. It would pass a casual glance, but not a registry check. So someone created a counterfeit stamp," I said. She looked at me over her glasses. "That is the accurate description of what this appears to be, yes." She handed me a printed verification report showing the discrepancy, circled and dated. I added it to the growing stack in my folder and drove back downtown. In Patricia's office that afternoon, she spread everything out on the conference table. The probate clerk's flag on the codicil. The bank's fraud report from the access attempts. The voicemail. The notary registry discrepancy. The original will, clean and properly executed, prepared by Patricia's firm 6 months before my mother passed during one of her better weeks, witnessed by 2 people who had sat in this same office. Patricia tapped the stack once. The court date for the initial executor confirmation hearing is in 3 days, she said. We appear with all of this, and we let the judge see it in sequence. What about my brother? I asked. He'll be notified of the hearing as an interested party, she said, which means he'll be there. I thought about his voice on the phone, the easiness of it, the absolute confidence that I would either comply or be too overwhelmed to fight. Good, I said. My brother called 2 more times that evening. I didn't answer either. The second voicemail was less cheerful. He said I was making this harder than it needed to be. He said our mother wouldn't have wanted us fighting. He said if I kept playing executor like it was some kind of power position, he would have to protect his interests. Then, at the end of the message, the part that made my blood go cold and then settle into something steady and resolved, he said, I have people who knew Mom, people who saw how you controlled things at the end. Don't think I haven't been talking to the family. I had heard some version of that before too, about the controlled, about how taking care of someone becomes a crime when the person describing it wanted access to your mother's accounts while she was still alive and didn't want to be the one sleeping on the downstairs couch when her oxygen alarm went off at 3 a.m. I forwarded both voicemails to Patricia. Then I called my cousin, the one who had spent more time at my mother's house in those last months than anyone except me. She answered immediately and I told her what was happening. Not everything, just enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, He called me last week. He told me you were refusing to distribute the estate fairly and that Mom had changed her wishes at the end, but you were ignoring them. He asked me if I would be willing to make a statement. My throat tightened. What did you tell him? She exhaled. I told him I watched you give up 2 years of your life for her. I told him I wasn't making any statement. She paused. Elena, whatever he's doing, I'll tell the truth if anyone asks. I thanked her and hung up before she could hear how hard I was working to keep my voice steady. The hearing was on a Thursday morning. The courtroom was small and practical, the kind of room where the carpet is slightly worn in a path between the door and the bench because everyone who enters is either carrying something heavy or about to be. Patricia and I were there early. My brother arrived 7 minutes late with a woman beside him. I didn't recognize a paralegal from the looks of it, carrying a binder and wearing an expression of rehearsed calm. My brother looked at me across the room. He smiled. The particular smile of a person who has spent days convincing himself that confidence is the same thing as leverage. The judge came in without ceremony, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and a case file already open in front of her. She looked at both sides of the room without warmth or welcome. She looked at the file. She asked my brother to explain his petition contesting the original will and referencing the codicil. He stood. His voice was smooth and practiced, the cadence of someone who had rehearsed this. He said our mother had expressed, in the final months of her life, that she wanted her estate divided equally. He said the original will had been drafted during a period when she was under significant stress and that her true wishes were reflected in the codicil, which he had located among her personal papers. The judge looked at the codicil in her file. Was this document executed in the presence of counsel? No, my brother said. It's handwritten. She wrote it herself. The judge looked at Patricia. Counsel for the executor? Patricia stood and laid out the sequence without drama. The probate clerk's flag on the notary stamp. The registry discrepancy, showing the stamp number, had been altered. Robert's statement that he had never notarized any document for my mother. The hospice records showing my mother had been on continuous pain management and had not left the house during the week the codicil was supposedly signed. The bank's fraud report showing an unauthorized access attempt from my brother's city. The voicemails requesting direct transfer outside of probate. She handed up the exhibits in order and let the judge read. The room was very quiet. The judge looked at the codicil again, then at my brother, then at the notary registry report. Is there anything you want to add? She asked him. My brother opened his mouth. He said, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the stamp. Mom may have used a different notary. The judge's voice did not change in volume. It just became more precise. The document in front of me has a stamp number that has been altered from a registered notary's valid number. That notary has provided a sworn statement that he did not execute this document. Your mother's hospice provider has confirmed she did not leave the premises or receive outside visitors during the week this codicil is dated. She set the codicil down on the bench in a way that had a particular finality to it. This is not a misunderstanding about a stamp, she said. My brother's paralegal touched his arm. He sat down. The judge turned back to the file. I'm denying the petition to contest the will, she said. I'm confirming the original executor and the original distribution. She made a note on the file. I am also issuing an order that all estate correspondence be directed exclusively to the executor's verified address, requiring in-person confirmation for any amendments to the estate file. She looked up once more. Given the evidence presented regarding the notary stamp, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential forgery, fraudulent submission to a probate court, and unauthorized use of a notary seal. She looked at my brother with the expression of someone who has been watching people miscalculate for a long time. You'll want to get an attorney, she said to him. Your own. My brother's face had gone the color of something that had been left outside too long. Outside the courtroom, he tried to catch up with me in the hallway. Elena, he said. His voice had lost the easiness. There was something underneath it now, younger and smaller. The voice of someone who had just realized that the person they counted on to absorb everything had stopped absorbing. I kept walking. He said, You didn't have to make this a legal thing. I stopped. I turned around and looked at him, the way I had wanted to look at him for 2 years. Not with anger, because I had moved past anger somewhere around the third filing. With the kind of clarity that only shows up when you've run out of patience for a story that was never true. You forged her signature, I said. You created a fake notary stamp. You tried to access her account while she was dying and then called me to transfer money outside of probate while a fraudulent document was sitting in a court file. I kept my voice calm and even. That was never a family thing. That was always a legal thing. You made that choice. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I walked back to Patricia, who was already on the phone with the district attorney's office as a matter of professional obligation. She kept her voice professional and her notes tight. I stood beside her and looked out the courthouse windows at the parking lot below, at the ordinary movement of people going about their Thursday in a city where nothing that had just happened in that courtroom was visible from the outside. My phone showed 2 missed calls from cousins who had heard through the family network that the hearing had happened. I didn't call back yet. I stood quietly for a moment and let the weight of the last 3 weeks finish settling somewhere outside my body. 6 weeks later, the district attorney filed charges. Forgery of a private document. Fraudulent submission to a probate court. Unauthorized use of a notary seal. Attempted bank fraud connected to the access attempts. The charges were specific and sourced and tied to time-stamped records that he had generated himself, every step of it, from the document drop box at the county clerk to the kiosk login attempts at the bank. He hired his own attorney. The case took 5 months. At the end of it, he accepted a plea that included restitution, probation, and a requirement that he have no contact with me regarding the estate or any financial matter related to our mother's name. He never apologized. People who operate the way he operated don't apologize because apology would require admitting the plan existed, and admitting the plan existed would require admitting that the version of himself he had performed, the grieving son, the overlooked sibling, the one who only wanted what was fair, had been a costume the entire time. I kept the house. I kept the estate intact the way our mother intended it. I updated the locks, not dramatically, just practically, the way you update things when a chapter ends. The small succulent above the kitchen sink is still there. I water it on Sundays. I used to wonder whether I waited too long, whether I should have seen it earlier, moved faster, cut off the access and the patience and the quiet subsidizing of his life before he had enough of a foothold to try what he tried. But I've stopped asking that question because the answer isn't about timing. It's about records. Every time he made a move, he left a trail. The portal log, the voicemail, the submission form with his own name on it. He was so certain I would be too tired or too grieving or too conditioned to absorb it quietly that he never bothered to cover his tracks. That certainty was the only thing he ever gave me that was worth keeping. If you've been the one who stayed, the one who showed up, the one who handled everything while someone else decided being present was optional, and then watched that same person try to collect from what you built with your own exhaustion, tell me in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story is the kind that makes you feel less alone in what you've been carrying, hit like and subscribe. Because there are more of these, and none of them are over yet.